There is a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when someone who has spent their entire life running from love begins to turn toward it. But here's the truth most people miss. It doesn't look like love at first. It looks like hesitation. It sounds like confusion. It feels like distance. Because when an avoidant begins to fall in love, they don't say, "I love you." They say things like, "I don't want to mess this up," or "I've never felt this way before," or even, "I need a little space." And if you don't understand this language, you will misread the very moment their heart is opening. You see, people who avoid love aren't heartless. They are often the ones who feel the deepest, but learned somewhere along the way that love is not safe. So when they begin to feel something real, it doesn't feel like comfort, it feels like risk. And risk to them feels like danger. That's why when they say, "I need space," what they are often really saying is, "I feel something powerful and I don't know how to hold it without losing control." When they say, "I'm not ready," what they often mean is, "I care more than I expected and it terrifies me." And when they pull away, it's not always because they don't feel enough. It's often because they feel too much. Now here's where your power lies. Not in chasing, not in convincing, not in trying to prove. Your power lies in understanding without abandoning yourself. Because love, real love, is not built by rescuing someone from their fears. It's built by standing firmly in your own value while they decide whether they are ready to rise to meet you. You must learn to recognize the difference between someone who is incapable of love and someone who is learning how to love. An avoidant who is falling for you will show it in subtle ways. They will come back. They will try again. They will reveal pieces of themselves they've never shared before. But here is the divine principle you must never forget. Love is not just about what someone feels. It is about what they are willing to do with what they feel. So yes, listen to their words. Notice when they say, "I don't want to lose you." See the truth behind their fear, but also ask yourself, are they choosing courage or are they staying in comfort? Because you are not here to be someone's lesson in love. You are here to experience a love that meets you, honors you, and grows with you. And the right person, even if they are afraid, will not let their fear become the reason they lose you. So when an avoidant says those quiet, uncertain words, don't just hear them, understand them. But more importantly, choose yourself in the process. Because the greatest love story you will ever write is the one where you refuse to settle for anything less than a love that shows up. When someone who has spent their life avoiding emotional closeness says, "I don't want to lose you," it may sound simple on the surface. But beneath those words is a depth of feeling they often don't fully understand themselves. This isn't a casual statement for them. In fact, it's one of the clearest emotional admissions they are capable of making at that stage. Avoidant individuals are wired to protect their independence and emotional safety at all costs. They have learned, through past experiences, that getting too close to someone can lead to pain, disappointment, or loss of control. So they build walls. Not because they don't feel, but because they feel too much and don't trust that those feelings will be handled safely, either by others or even by themselves. So when they say, "I don't want to lose you," what they are really expressing is a crack in that protective armor. It's an acknowledgement that you matter to them in a way that feels significant, and significance is exactly what they tend to avoid. To them, caring deeply about someone introduces vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like risk. That statement is their way of revealing that, despite all their instincts to stay detached, they have formed an attachment they didn't plan for. But here's the nuance. This admission doesn't come from a place of emotional confidence. It often comes from fear. Not fear of losing just anyone, but fear of losing you specifically, because your presence has begun to impact them in a way they didn't anticipate. They may not say, "I love you," because that feels too final, too exposing, too binding, but "I don't want to lose you" is their way of standing at the edge of that truth without fully stepping into it. It's also important to understand that when an avoidant expresses this, it doesn't automatically mean they are ready to act in alignment with those feelings. There can be a gap between what they feel and what they are capable of doing. They might still pull away, they might still need space, they might still struggle with consistency. But that statement reveals that, internally, something has shifted. You are no longer just an option or a passing connection. You have become emotionally relevant. This is where many people misunderstand the situation. They hear those words and assume it means everything is about to fall into place, that the avoidant is now ready to fully commit and show up in the way they desire. But in reality, it's just the beginning of an internal conflict within that person. Part of them wants to move closer, while another part is urging them to retreat to safety. So the real significance of "I don't want to lose you" is not in what it promises, but in what it reveals. It reveals attachment where there was once detachment. It reveals fear where there was once indifference. It reveals that your presence has touched something deeper than they are used to allowing. And perhaps most importantly, it reveals that love for them doesn't arrive as certainty, it arrives as tension. When an avoidant says, "I need space," it can feel confusing, even painful, especially if you interpret it at face value as distance, rejection, or loss of interest. But in many cases, those words are not about a lack of feeling, they are about an overload of it. For someone who is not used to processing deep emotional connection, closeness can quickly become overwhelming. Avoidant individuals often associate intimacy with a loss of control. As things begin to get deeper, more consistent, or more emotionally meaningful, their internal alarm system can start to activate. It's not because something is wrong with you or the connection. It's because something inside them is unfamiliar. They may begin to feel exposed, vulnerable, and uncertain about how to navigate these emotions. And when that happens, their instinct is not to lean in, it's to step back. So when they say, "I need space," what they are often trying to do is regulate themselves. They are attempting to create enough distance to make sense of what they're feeling, to calm the intensity, and to regain a sense of emotional stability. It's less about escaping you and more about trying not to lose themselves in something they don't yet know how to handle. This is where the misunderstanding often occurs. The person on the receiving end hears space and interprets it as disinterest or detachment. They may feel the urge to close the gap, to chase, to seek reassurance, or to prove their value. But ironically, those reactions can intensify the avoidant's sense of overwhelm, pushing them even further away. Because for an avoidant, closeness needs to feel chosen, not pressured. If they feel that someone is trying to pull them closer while they are already struggling internally, it reinforces their belief that relationships are suffocating or demanding. So they retreat more, not because they care less, but because they don't know how to stay present without feeling consumed. At the same time, it's important to recognize that "I need space" is not always a sign of healthy processing. There is a difference between someone taking space to reflect and grow, and someone using space as a way to avoid responsibility or emotional engagement. The key lies in what follows that request. Do they return with clarity, effort, and intention? Or do they disappear into patterns of inconsistency and distance? When an avoidant is genuinely developing feelings, their need for space often comes with an underlying tension. They don't feel completely comfortable being away from you either. They may still check in, still show signs of care, or return after a period of withdrawal with renewed effort. That push and pull is not random. It reflects the internal battle between their desire for connection and their fear of it. Understanding this doesn't mean you should accept endless distance or tolerate behavior that leaves you feeling uncertain and fulfilled. It simply means recognizing that in some cases, space is not the opposite of love. It is a response to the intensity of it. For someone who is used to emotional self-protection, love doesn't feel immediately safe or grounding. It feels disruptive, and before they can fully step into it, they often need moments where they can breathe, recalibrate, and slowly expand their capacity for closeness. So "I need space" is not always a closing door. Sometimes it's the pause before someone learns how to keep it open without fear. When an avoidant begins to check in consistently, even in small, seemingly insignificant ways, it can be easy to overlook or underestimate what that actually means. You might think it's just a message or it's nothing special, but for someone who is naturally inclined to maintain emotional distance, consistency is not casual. It is intentional. It is effort. And more often than not, it is a quiet reflection of growing emotional investment. Avoidant individuals don't typically build habits around connection unless something or someone matters to them. Their default mode is independence, space, and minimal emotional reliance on others. So when they begin to reach out regularly, even if it's just a simple "how was your day?" or sharing a small detail about theirs, It signals that you are occupying space in their mind beyond the surface level. What makes this especially meaningful is that it often happens without grand declarations or dramatic shifts in behavior. They may not suddenly become openly expressive or intensely affectionate. In fact, their communication might still seem reserved or understated. But the consistency itself is the message. It shows that despite their instinct to detach, they are choosing again and again to maintain a thread of connection with you. This kind of behavior reflects a shift in priorities. Where they once might have been comfortable going days without contact, they now feel a subtle pull to stay in touch. And that pull doesn't come from obligation. It comes from interest, curiosity, and a growing sense of attachment they may not even fully recognize yet. However, it's important to understand the nature of this consistency. With avoidance, it often builds gradually. It may not be perfectly steady or predictable in the beginning. There might still be moments where they pull back or become less responsive. But when they return to that pattern of checking in, it reveals something deeper. You are not easily forgotten, and the connection is not easily dismissed. For them, these small acts of communication are a way of staying close without feeling overwhelmed. It allows them to engage at a pace that feels manageable. Instead of diving into intense emotional exchanges, they maintain connection through lighter, safer interactions. And while it may not look like the kind of communication you're used to, it is often their way of bridging the gap between distance and closeness. This is where patience and awareness become essential. If you only measure love through grand gestures or constant emotional expression, you might miss the significance of what's actually happening. Because for an avoidant, sending that message, initiating that conversation, remembering to check in is not automatic. It requires them to move against their natural tendency to withdraw. At the same time, consistency should not be confused with minimal effort. There is a difference between someone who is gradually opening up and someone who is keeping you at arm's length with just enough contact to maintain control. The key is in the direction of the behavior. Is their consistency slowly increasing? Are they becoming more present over time? Are they showing more interest, even in subtle ways? When an avoidant is truly developing feelings, their small efforts begin to form a pattern. And that pattern over time becomes a quiet but powerful indicator of emotional investment. It shows that even if they're not ready to fully express what they feel, they are no longer indifferent. Because indifference doesn't check in. Indifference doesn't build habits of connection. Indifference doesn't return. Consistency, even in its simplest form, is often the first language of love for someone who is still learning how to speak it. When an avoidant says, "I've never opened up like this before," it may sound like a simple observation, but in reality, it is one of the most significant emotional thresholds they can cross. For someone who has built their identity around self-protection, emotional control, and distance, opening up is not natural. It is learned, resisted, and often feared. So when they acknowledge that they are sharing something deeper with you than they ever have with anyone else, it reflects a profound internal shift. Avoidant individuals don't just withhold emotions from others, they often suppress or compartmentalize their own feelings as well. Vulnerability to them is not just uncomfortable, it can feel unsafe. It brings up a sense of exposure that they have spent years trying to avoid. So when they begin to reveal personal thoughts, past experiences, insecurities, or emotions, they are stepping into territory that challenges everything they've known about how to protect themselves. That's why this statement carries so much weight. It's not about impressing you or trying to create a moment. It's often an honest admission of unfamiliarity. They are recognizing in real time that something about this connection is different. You have created a space where they feel just enough safety to lower their guard, even if only slightly. And for them, that slightly is significant. But what makes this moment even more complex is that opening up doesn't automatically feel good for them. In fact, it can trigger discomfort almost immediately afterward. They may share something meaningful and then later feel exposed, vulnerable, or even regretful. This can lead to mixed signals. One moment they are open and connected, and the next they seem distant or withdrawn. This isn't because their openness wasn't genuine, it's because they are still learning how to tolerate that level of emotional exposure. So when they say, "I've never opened up like this before," it often comes with an unspoken layer, "and I don't know what to do with it now." They are navigating unfamiliar emotional ground, and that can create both closeness and fear at the same time. It's also important to understand that this kind of openness doesn't happen quickly or easily. It usually unfolds in stages. Small disclosures at first, followed by slightly deeper ones as trust begins to build. Each time they open up, they are testing the safety of the connection. They are observing how you respond, whether you judge, whether you push, whether you respect their pace. Your reaction becomes part of the environment that either encourages further openness or reinforces their instinct to retreat. This is where many people unintentionally disrupt the process. When someone finally opens up, the natural response might be to dive deeper, ask more questions, or try to accelerate the emotional connection. But for an avoidant, too much intensity too quickly can feel overwhelming. What they often need instead is space within the connection, a sense that they can open up without losing control or being pulled into something they're not ready for. At the same time, it's essential to recognize that vulnerability alone is not the full measure of emotional availability. Someone can open up in moments and still struggle to maintain consistency, presence, or commitment. The statement reveals depth of feeling and trust, but it doesn't automatically guarantee readiness for a fully expressed relationship. Still, when an avoidant reaches the point where they can say, "I've never opened up like this before," it marks a meaningful shift. It shows that the walls they once relied on are no longer as solid as they used to be. It shows that despite their fears, they are allowing someone to see beyond the surface. And for someone who has spent so long guarding their inner world, that kind of exposure is not casual. It is a quiet act of courage. When an avoidant remembers the small details about you, the things you casually mentioned, the preferences you didn't emphasize, the moments that seemed ordinary to you, it can be easy to overlook the meaning behind it. You might assume it's just good memory, or politeness, or coincidence. But for someone who is naturally inclined to stay emotionally detached, paying attention at that level is rarely accidental. Avoidant individuals tend to keep a certain distance in relationships, not just physically but mentally and emotionally. They often limit how much they invest their attention in others because attention creates attachment, and attachment introduces vulnerability. So when they begin to notice retain and sun, recall specific details about you, it signals that their mind is engaging with you in a deeper, more consistent way than they may openly admit. This kind of attention is quiet, but it's intentional. It might show up in subtle ways. Remembering how you take your coffee, bringing up something you said days or weeks ago, noticing a shift in your mood before you even explain it, or referencing a story you once shared in passing. These are not grand gestures, but they reveal presence. And presence for an avoidant is a form of emotional investment. What makes this especially meaningful is that it often happens beneath the surface of their usual behavior. They may not be overly expressive or verbally affectionate. They might not constantly validate or reassure you in obvious ways, but their attention tells a different story. It shows that they are observing, processing, and internally engaging with who you are. For someone who typically prioritizes independence and self-focus, this shift in attention is significant. It means you are no longer just part of their external environment. You have become part of their internal world. They are thinking about you when you are not there. They are connecting dots between conversations. They are building a mental and emotional map of you, even if they don't articulate it. However, because avoidants often struggle with expressing emotions directly, this attentiveness can be one of the ways their feelings come through. Instead of saying, "I care about you deeply," they show it by remembering. Instead of openly declaring affection, they demonstrate it through awareness. It's a quieter language, but it carries meaning if you know how to read it. At the same time, it's important to stay grounded in what this behavior represents and what it doesn't. Remembering details shows interest and growing attachment, but it doesn't automatically mean they are ready to fully show up in the relationship. There can still be hesitation, inconsistency, or emotional distance in other areas. The attention is a piece of the puzzle, not the entire picture. What matters is the pattern. Are they consistently attentive over time? Do those small details translate into thoughtful actions? Even if subtle, do you feel seen? Even if not always verbally reassured? When an avoidant is genuinely developing feelings, their attentiveness tends to deepen rather than fade. It becomes more natural for them to tune into you, even as they continue to navigate their own internal resistance. It's also worth recognizing that this level of awareness requires effort from them. even if it doesn't look like effort on the outside. It means they are allowing themselves to be mentally and emotionally present with you in a way that goes against their instinct to stay detached. And that shift doesn't happen without a reason, because people don't remember details about someone they feel indifferent toward. They don't hold onto small moments that don't matter, and they don't invest attention where there is no emotional pull. So when an avoidant remembers the little things about you, it's not just about memory, it's about meaning. When an avoidant says, "I'm not ready for a relationship," it can feel like a clear, definitive statement, one that sounds like rejection, finality, or a lack of interest. But in many cases, especially when there is clear connection and ongoing engagement, those words are less about the absence of feelings and more about the presence of fear. Avoidant individuals often associate relationships with expectations, pressure, and a perceived loss of independence. To them, the label of a relationship doesn't just represent connection, it represents responsibility, emotional exposure, and the possibility of being needed in ways they don't feel equipped to handle. So even when they begin to develop genuine feelings, the idea of formalizing that connection can trigger a sense of internal resistance. When they say, "I'm not ready," what they are often expressing is not, "I don't feel enough," but rather, "I don't trust myself to handle what this requires." There's a gap between their emotional experience and their perceived capacity to sustain it. They may feel drawn to you, enjoy your presence, and even think about you when you're not around. But at the same time, they are questioning whether they can meet the expectations that come with deeper involvement. This is why their behavior can feel so contradictory. They might spend time with you, open up in moments, show care in subtle ways, and then suddenly reinforce this boundary of not being ready. It's not because their feelings have disappeared. It's because the closer things get to something defined and committed, the more their fear begins to surface. For an avoidant, staying in the undefined space can feel safer. It allows them to experience connection without fully confronting the responsibilities they associate with a relationship. It gives them a sense of control. They can move closer when it feels comfortable and pull away when it becomes overwhelming. The label, however, feels like a point of no return, and that's what they're trying to avoid. But it's important to understand the deeper layer behind this statement. When someone truly feels nothing, they don't usually need to explain that they're not ready. They simply disengage. The fact that they are still present, still communicating, still maintaining some level of connection while saying this often indicates that there is something meaningful there. They are trying to manage feelings they don't fully understand while protecting themselves from what they fear those feelings could lead to. At the same time, this is where clarity becomes essential for you. Because while their statement may be rooted in fear rather than indifference, it still reflects their current limitations. It tells you where they are emotionally and what they believe they can handle. And no matter how strong their feelings might be beneath the surface, readiness is not something that can be forced from the outside. There is a difference between someone who is gradually working through their fears and expanding their capacity for connection and someone who is using not ready as a consistent shield to avoid growth altogether. The distinction lies in their actions over time. Are they slowly becoming more open, more consistent, more willing to meet you halfway? Or are they staying in the same pattern, using that statement to keep the connection on their terms? Because ultimately, love is not just about what someone feels internally, it's about what they are willing to build externally. And while "I'm not ready" may hide deeper emotions, it also defines a boundary that you have to decide how to respond to. So when you hear those words, it's not just about interpreting their hidden meaning. It's about recognizing the reality they are showing you in that moment. When an avoidant comes back after pulling away, it can stir a mix of emotions: relief, confusion, hope, and sometimes even frustration. You may wonder what changed, what made them return, or whether this time will be different. But to truly understand what's happening in that moment, you have to look beneath the surface of the behavior and into the pattern that drives it. Avoidant individuals are often caught in a cycle of wanting connection and fearing it at the same time. When things begin to feel emotionally intense, their instinct is to create distance. Pulling away gives them a sense of control. It allows them to quiet the internal discomfort that closeness can trigger. In that space, they can reconnect with their independence, regain emotional balance, and temporarily escape the vulnerability that comes with attachment. But here's what's important. If the connection didn't matter, they wouldn't come back. When an avoidant returns after creating distance, it often means that the emotional bond didn't fade in their absence. In fact, The space they took may have clarified something for them. Without the immediate intensity of the connection, they are able to process their feelings from a distance, and sometimes that distance reveals just how much the person actually means to them. This is the part many people misunderstand. They assume that when someone pulls away, it's because their feelings are weak or uncertain. But in the case of an avoidant, pulling away can happen precisely because the feelings are strong enough to disrupt their sense of control. And when they come back, it's often because those feelings didn't disappear. They persisted. However, their return is not always accompanied by clarity or transformation. They may come back with the same emotional limitations they had before. They might reach out, reconnect, and then over time feel overwhelmed again and repeat the cycle. This push and pull dynamic is not necessarily a game. It's often a reflection of an unresolved internal conflict. So the key is not just that they come back, but how they come back. Do they return with greater awareness of their patterns? Do they make an effort to communicate more openly? Do they show signs of trying to handle closeness differently than before? Or do they simply re-enter your life as if nothing happened, offering the same level of inconsistency and uncertainty? Because coming back on its own is not proof of readiness, it is proof of attachment. It shows that the connection has a hold on them, but it doesn't automatically mean they know how to sustain it in a healthy, consistent way. At the same time, their return does carry meaning. It reflects that despite their instinct to run, there is something about you and the connection that continues to draw them back. It suggests that what they feel is not easily replaced or forgotten. And for someone who values emotional distance, that kind of pull is significant. But this is where your awareness matters most. It's easy to interpret their return as validation, as evidence that you matter, that the connection is special, that love is present. And while there may be truth in that, it's only part of the picture. Because the deeper question is not why did they come back? It's what are they doing differently now that they're here? An avoidant returning without growth will recreate the same experience. An avoidant returning with intention will begin to shift the dynamic. So yes, their return can signal that the connection is stronger than their instinct to stay away. But what truly defines the future of that connection is whether they are willing to face what made them leave in the first place and choose consciously to do something different this time. Thank you for taking the time to listen and grow through these words. It truly means more than you know. Goodbye for now, and may you always choose the kind of love that chooses you back.